Today in 4.5, we're going to learn the quadratic formula. So sometimes we have quadratics like x squared minus 6x minus 7, and that will factor into x minus 7 and x plus 1. And where does that cross the x-axis? What are the roots? Well, we set this one equal to 0 and add 7. And then we set this one equal to 0, which is going to give me, what is that? Negative 1. So this quadratic equation hits the x-axis at 7 and at negative 1. So it looks like that. Okay? But sometimes quadratic equations don't hit the x-axis in nice places. For instance, let's do minus 6. If I try to factor this, x squared negative 6, multiply those together, negative 6x squared, are there two numbers that multiply to be negative 6 and add to be negative 6? No. So using factoring, this quadratic has no solution. But the one we just graphed looks like this. No, I didn't draw it very well. It hits at negative 1 and at 7, and it hit the y-axis at negative 7. This one hits the y-axis at negative 6, so it's just a little bit higher, and it still hits the x-axis twice. So we need another way to figure out where the graph crosses the x-axis. And there are a couple other ways, but I'm going to teach you today the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is a little bit complicated. It is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. It's a formula that allows you to plug the numbers from a quadratic into this equation, and it will solve the equation for you. Now, what are a, b, and c? Well, if I had a quadratic equation that looked like this, ax squared plus bx plus c, and it has to be in this order. A has to be the x squared term, b has to be the x term, and c has to be the constant. If I take the original equation, x squared minus 6x minus 7, in this case, a is 1, b is negative 6, and c is negative 7. So this formula will do all of the work for me to figure out where this graph crosses the x-axis. So negative b is going to equal, what is the opposite of b? It's going to be 6. So we do 6 plus or minus. Now you have to be careful with b squared. If in your calculator you type in negative 6 squared, you're going to get negative 36. Is negative 6 squared actually negative 36? No. What is negative 6 times negative 6? Positive 36. So why would my calculator spit out negative 36? It is using order of operations. Your calculator is programmed to do subtraction after it does exponents. So if you plug a negative in your calculator, I recommend putting parentheses around it, or just type in 6 squared if you wanted to know what that was. So 6 squared is 36. And then this piece of the equation is where students usually make mistakes. I recommend writing it out to the side. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 7. What is negative 4 times 1 times negative 7? 28. Positive. And then we write plus 28. And the reason I recommend doing it that way is you are less likely to mess up that sign if you write it out, everything out to the side. Over What is 2 times a? 2. Okay. Now we need to simplify what's under the square root. So we get 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 plus 28 is 64 over 2. What is the square root of 64? 8. So I get 6 plus or minus 8 over 2. And you have to do each one of those separately. 6 plus 8 would be 14. And 14 divided by 2 is 7. So x is equal to 7. And 6 minus 8, negative 2 divided by 2, negative 1. And what do you notice? Those are the same answers we got originally. Okay? So the quadratic formula will work even if the original quadratic factors. But if it factors, we're going to factor it usually. So we want to learn how to use the quadratic equation when things don't factor. So what if I change this equation and I change that negative 7 to a 6? So same idea. Negative b is 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 times 6 is 36. And then I write out negative 4 times 1 times negative 6. What would that be? Negative 24 over 2. Oh, that's positive 24, sorry. So we get 6 plus or minus the square root of, what is 36 plus 24? 60 over 2. Now, this is why we learned how to simplify square roots. That is not in simplest form. To put it in simplest form, oh, she's on her phone. You're not paying attention. Wow, she's really in her own element there. Huh? What? Oh, yeah, it's okay. First one's free. So we write 60. What goes into 60? 6 and 10, 2 and 3, 2 and 5. Does anything come out? A 2. Whoop, throwing my stylus again. So I have a set of 2's. On the outside, I can write 2, and what stays on the inside? 3 times 5, which is 15 over 2. Now, remember, you cannot cancel something in the square root with something out of the square root. That's not allowed. But these all share a 2. So I can divide a 2 out, and I get 3 plus or minus the square root of 15. That is what we call the exact answer. Okay? But if I told you, hey, today you worked for me for an hour, I'm going to pay you 3 plus root 15. You're going to say, could you turn that into a decimal for me, please? So if the problem says find the exact answer, then you write 3 plus root 15 and 3 minus root 15. But if you're looking for the decimal answer, then you need to type in 3 plus root 15 and hit enter. And then 3 minus the root 15. And then you'll get the answer. Okay, so it just depends on what the question is asking. Okay, let's look at an Alex problem. I don't have it ready to go. Sorry. It's right here. Okay. This one is out of order. So, A is negative 16, B is 44, and C is 4. And it wants to know, if you throw this ball up in the air, when is it going to hit the ground? Yeah. So t is time. All we have to do is plug these numbers into the quadratic equation. So we get negative b, so negative 44. Well, let me write this out. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That equation is right here if you need it. And again, it's called the quadratic formula. Yeah, it's right there. It's been there all along. So negative 44 plus or minus the square root of b squared. I don't know what that is. So 44 squared is 1936. So 1936. And then negative 4 times negative 16 times 4. Plug that into your calculator. Negative 4 times 16 times negative 4. Oh, it's negative 16. Sorry. Negative 4 times negative 16 times 4 is 256. So we get plus 256 over negative 16 times 2 is negative 32. Okay? Now, I need to figure out what that is. Pull out my calculator. 1936 plus 256 is 2192. So negative 44 plus or minus the square root of 2192 over negative 32. What goes into 2192? Well, I know 2 does. So I can divide that by 2. 2 and 1096. What goes into 1096? 2 does. So 2 and 548. So 548 divided by 2 is 274. Divided by 2 is 2 and 137. And I'm not sure. 3 doesn't work. 4 doesn't work. 5, 6, 7 doesn't work. 8, 9, 10, 11. So 137 is prime. Can I pull anything out? 2 pairs of 2s. So what goes on the outside? A pair of two 2s, so which would be a 4. And what's left on the inside? 137. Over negative 32. Does that simplify? Can I take anything out of those 3 numbers? A 2 would work. There's a bigger one. 4 would work. So we take out a 4, negative 11, plus or minus the square root of 137 over negative 8. So how does it want you to... Oh, it wants the decimal answers. Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So in my calculator, I'm going to write negative 11 plus the square root of 137, and then we'll divide that by, what was it? Negative 8. So for the first answer, I get negative 0.08 seconds. That doesn't make any sense, right? So you're standing in the air and you throw the ball, and it wants to know when is the ball on the ground. Well, apparently 1/10 of a second ago it was on the ground. So that's when it would be on the ground if it shot off the ground and went past your hand and then hit the ground. So in this case, the negative answer doesn't make any sense. We can't go back in time and pretend that the ball was on the ground. So then we try the other one. Negative 11 minus the square root of 137. And we divide that by negative 8. And I get 2.8 seconds from now. Okay? All right, let's do one more. Let's do this one. Okay. There's one thing I have to do with this before I use the quadratic formula. What is it? It's not ready for the quadratic formula. I got to get the 1 on the other side, right? It has to equal 0 in order for the quadratic formula to work. So 9x squared plus 3x minus 1. So A is 9, B is 3, and C is negative 1. So in the quadratic formula, we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of B squared is 9 minus 4, negative 4 times 9 times negative 1 is 36. So plus 36 over 2 times 9, which is 18. So that is negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 45 over 18. What goes into 45? 9 and 5, 3 and 3. Can I bring anything out? You can bring out a set of 3's. So on the outside, I have 3 times the square root of what did not come out? The 5 over 18. Can I take anything out of all of those numbers? A 3. So I pull a 3 out of each of those, and I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 5 over 6. So now I need the decimal answer. My calculator go. So let's see if I can move it over far enough. So negative 1 plus the square root of 5. And if I just put divide by 3 right here, I'm going to get the wrong answer because I want to divide the 1 and the root 5. So I'm going to hit enter, or divide by 6 I meant. So one answer is 0.2, and we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So this would be 0.21. And, well, this problem's not a throwing problem. So negative 1 minus the square root of 5, and then divide that by 6. The other answer is negative 0.53. Well, 0.54. So there are only 2 problems that you have to figure out today. 4.5. Get to work. Oh, I forgot. How are you going to memorize the quadratic formula? Okay. Okay. All right. So here is how you memorize how you memorize the quadratic formula with Pop Goes the Weasel. Oh.
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Oh, adorable. Here we go again.
The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Okay, there you go. It's going to keep you up at night. All right, get to work.